Hey, welcome to the Peep Show Talk. And today, on episode number 23, I'm very excited. This is a gentleman who I've known for probably more than 20 years, but I didn't really know his history until maybe 4 or 5 years ago. And that's Mike Lavin from the St. Louis area. And the thing I didn't know about Mike is not only was he a prior U.S. Army officer that served in Vietnam, he's a Transportation Corps officer, and he commanded a company in Vietnam that also had gun trucks. So I thought people may be interested in that. So if you enjoy these videos, go ahead and like, share, comment. If you don't like these videos, just go away. Just go away. I don't have time for your negativity. Don't give me negative comments. Just go watch something else. There's probably some Kim Kardashian video you can watch or something that you'll get your jollies on. You won't get your jollies here. So without further delay, Mike, hey, how are you today?
I'm doing fine.
Okay, so why don't you tell us? You had an interesting journey in the Army and a unique journey, and I think people that collect military vehicles would be interested in kind of some of the things that you did. So why don't you tell us kind of where you were born and your backstory before you made it to Vietnam?
Okay, I am a St. Louis boy, and for my most of my life, I lived in Brentwood, Missouri. It's a suburb of St. Louis County, and went to Brentwood High School. And during high school times, I was a little bit of an introvert. Kids would probably call me geek. I wasn't interested in sports or anything, but I am an Eagle Scout, and I love to take 20-mile hikes. I would often hike 11.3 miles Saturday morning to go to my father's toy store to work. Even in Scouts, we'd go every 3 or 4 weekends out of state to take these long walks. I really wasn't a person that liked to sweat, and I'm a part of what I tell a lot of the kids that interview me is that um, I'm conscripted service. I really had no choice about entering the service, and I really don't like to sweat, despite me being an avid scouting and I liked camping. And I didn't really feel up to it. And I think that's probably because I had low self-esteem when I was in high school. I was one of the youngest members of my class. And so when I went away to college, which was Westminster College in Fulton, Missouri, I went through the ROTC program, thinking that going into the military as an officer might be a little bit easier, and maybe I wouldn't have to sweat or work so much. By the time I was in, and even after I got out, I thought that was a really wrong philosophy and thought. And the fact that I went into service and did what I did really was made me a much better person. And it's not a thing that I would want to discourage anybody from joining. So when I entered active service, which was actually November 1967, my first duty station was Aberdeen Proving Ground in Maryland. And during Officer Basic, we had the opportunity there to say if we wanted to extend our time in the military service or just wanted a 2-year obligation. And most guys by that time, age 22, wanted to stay in the United States and really only wanted a 2-year obligation. They wanted to get back to their normal life. And I wasn't married and thought, what the hell? I'll sign up for an extended time in the military and take my chances. So my first duty station was with the 7th Corps in Kornwestheim, Germany, specifically with the 1st Maintenance Battalion in Kornwestheim. And I was the S1 for the battalion,
Were you
which
a
was,
were you trans corps officer, transportation
no,
corps?
I was an ordnance officer to begin with.
Okay.
Okay. And I actually was able during the time I was in Germany for 2 years to live on the economy because housing was a little bit short. And besides, I was an officer. And I got to do on off time what I wanted to do. Like if I was stateside, duty was pretty light. It was a 9 to 5 job. And I lived in a town between Heilbronn and Stuttgart called Ehrlichheim. I was the only American that lived there. And during that time, I drove 2 brand new Ford Mustangs. I had a 67 fastback and then a 1970 fastback in 69. And I had lived in Germany prior to my military service. I was in the German Boy Scouts as a youth, And yeah, I owned a pair of leather shorts and all that other stuff. And all of our camping gear was Wehrmacht surplus. And so we looked like a bunch of Hitler Youths walking around with all this camping gear on our backs. It was exactly military. So I was
How
definitely,
did it happen that you were in the German Boy Scouts prior?
well,
Like,
when I was about 15 years old or a little before, I got a German pen pal who lived in Hamburg, Germany, Wolfgang Klopsch. We still write each other. We've been back and forth to each other's houses. And one summer, I just decided to go live with him. And he was in the Deutsche Pfadfinderbund, which was the German scouting organization before it was the Hitler Youth. And so all of our symbols, our Julia, our pullover, our neckerchief slides, our belt buckles and everything all had lilies in the shape of a fleur-de-lis. And that's probably one reason why we used all of our camping gear. In fact, the belt on my leather shorts is actually a German combat belt, and we cut off the hook. And we have a Boy Scout buckle on it, again, with a diamond-shaped fleur-de-lis. While I was, in Germany, I kind of did stuff with the Germans at the time and some of the American Boy Scouts and the French Boy Scouts. And I just did stuff. What was interesting, I could dress German, even if we were in our scouting program. And if I went somewhere in Germany, in Munich, like we did one time, and I was in all my German garb, a man invited me up to the Hofbrauhaus. A gentleman invited us to come up to the front and sit with him and have beer, chicken, and radishes. And he leaned over to Haga, our ruler, and said, or not ruler, our little patrol leader for the day. He goes, I was in the Hitler Youth when I was young, in German, of course. But it was interesting, if I didn't talk about politics and I talked daily language, since I spoke Schwabian, the dialect of the Stuttgart and Heilbronn area, I could get by and I could pass as 100% German. So it was keep your mouth kind of shut and enjoy the ability to get into a society and see what's going on, because I would fit visually. So that was my life for the 2 years. And for, all of a sudden, I thought maybe Vietnam would be over. And on Christmas 1969, I got my orders to go to Vietnam. So I left Germany, and on my way over, and I think we might talk about it a little bit way later. I'm not say way later, but during my last week in Germany, the Deutsche Bundeswehr took care of me because I didn't have a place to sleep, and took me to work because I had to sell my Mustang. And then the last day going there, a German family that I became very friendly with invited me up to their house, and they gave me a gold ring. And we can talk about that later. And
well, why don't you just talk about it now?
All right. They gave me a gold ring when I arrived, and I was spending the night with them, and they were the ones that were going to take me to Rhein-Main Air Base to fly out of Germany. And at first I refused the gold ring. It had a ruby stone in it. I could clearly see it was a family heirloom. And Mrs. Wenzel said, we'd like you to take this to Vietnam and wear it, because we want you to return. And at first I refused it because I obviously saw it was a family heirloom. And she said her father wore it in World War I and came home from the trenches, and that she wore it during the saturation bombing of Heilbronn in December of 44. And there's a longer story that goes with that, but basically she was blown to the basement down a stairwell, and because she wasn't going to go down, and everybody was begging her to go down, but a bomb came through and sort of pushed her down the steps. And she says, we want you to come back. So with that, I accepted the ring. And at the same time, I was prepared for giving something to Achim, her son that I'd been such good friends with. And basically what that turned out to be was a $20,000 life insurance policy that if I was killed in Vietnam would become his, because I knew he wanted to become a doctor when he got out of school. And he did, in fact. We still keep in touch. He became a very Googleable, famous cancer research doctor in Germany. So, that's a cool ass story in itself, both of those relationships. So I go to Vietnam, and I landed actually down in Tan Son Nhut. I was flown up to Da Nang, where I sat in a repo depot for a few days, and then I got my assignment and it turned out to be the 39th Transportation Battalion, located on Camp Eagle, just outside of Fubai.
Mhm.
And for the first 6 months that I was stationed there, life was very, 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 very easy for me. I was in an air-conditioned office. I had a hooch that had a steel frame bed and a mattress. I stored my clothing in a metal cabinet. I had hooch maids that cleaned my laundry. I could go listen to bands that were coming in and out. I got to go see movies. On Sundays, I would go downtown way to the Citadel and go to Cub Scout and Boy Scout meetings that were just like stateside, fully uniformed kids. And I mean, it was bizarre in the middle of a war zone. And this was just 2 years after the Marines fought the NVA and the Viet Cong there in Vietnam.
In the
In the
Citadel
Citadel.
way, yeah.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah,
like 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 was in the movie Full Metal Jacket.
yes. And it was just interesting. And I would just go there because I was an officer and I could. And I even went to Boy Scout activities in downtown Hue as if I was back in stateside. And I even this is the bizarre thing. Long story, but I'll make it short. I had an invitation to go to a Boy Scout jamboree in Japan in August 1970 from some American dependents in Okinawa, and I wasn't in Vietnam long enough to go on R&R. And my battalion commander said if I could figure out a way to go to a Boy Scout jamboree out of a combat zone, go for it, because he was a farmer scouter. So I put in, get this, for administrative leave from a combat zone. Everyone laughed until I got back on the 6th endorsement approved by the Secretary of the Army. This was not just a hired command. So I had to call my mom, get 2 Boy Scout uniforms. The American dependents in Okinawa sent me the patches, and a Korean tailor put my Boy Scout uniform on. And I had specific orders from the government to fly to Japan for 2 weeks of administrative leave from a combat zone.
Wow,
So,
I think we would call that like approval from God, you know.
well, at that point in time it was, and nobody laughed when I was put on a Jeep taken down to Da Nang. And when they landed, the plane landed in Okinawa, I was the only person to get off the plane, walked into the terminal. 2 Boy Scout troops were waiting for me. We all loaded into a C-130 aircraft, flew up to Yokota Air Base in Japan, in Tokyo. 4 days in Tokyo, a week camping at the base of Fujiyama, great hospitality. I came very close to the now Emperor of Japan and his wife. You know, I was like within probably 50 yards of them at that time. Several of us climbed Fujiyama, spent the night on top to watch the sun come up the next day, where they get the Japanese battle flag to raise above the clouds. And then 2 days at the World's Fair at Osaka, then flew back down to Saigon and took a Chinook ride up, and the Chinook helicopter landed me, within 50 yards of my hooch, because I was right near a helicopter pad. It was like getting an Uber driver with a Chinook at my control. And then, it was kind of normal until the 1st of December of 1970. I became the company commander of the 515th Transportation Company, which is what we'll talk a little bit about now. Now, what's interesting about that, I became an ordnance officer in a transportation company. I was the only ordnance officer that actually was in any command position in the 39th Trans Battalion. The company had a series of discipline problems. I had one guy, Larry Simon, who delivered a baby in my motor pool. He was acting as a pimp, bringing on the girls. I had 2 heroin addicts. I had potheads and juicers, and I participated in none of that. So at first I gave out 13 Article 15s, which was to prove to me later on when we were in the field that was the gift from God, because at that point, all your sub people, your sergeants, took control and said, do you want to go see the old man? And if you don't do what I say, you'll be seeing the old man. And of course, everybody at that point said no, because I took the majority. I took all I could take from him, either rank and money or just money. and I busted the situation.
Hmm. Yeah, David Halberstam said we sent the best army in the world to Vietnam and we got the worst one back with lots and lots of issues like that. And I think you were kind of at the tail end of that.
Yeah, it's that is the case, and we'll probably get to that if towards the end of my conversation,
Hmm.
because to all those listening, I keep up with every man in my company that wants to keep up with me. I know where they all are, and I think that's very unusual for in excess of 50 years at this point.
Hmm.
Um,
So it looks like just reading this, this is from the CBI History of the 39th Quartermaster Battalion website. It says in December 70, Lieutenant Colonel Ellis picked his S1, Captain Mike Lavin, to command the 515th Light Medium Truck Company. The fact that Lavin was an ordnance officer made this unusual. The 515th had failed both uh, command maintenance inspections and IG inspections. So basically, it was a broke dick unit at that point. And Ellis felt like Lavin had what it would take to instill discipline in the command. And as the former S1, you worked directly with the battalion commander, so you guys knew each other probably fairly well at that point.
yes.
Lavin made a couple changes immediately. First, he made whorehouses off limits in the camp. Second, he made immediate punishment immediate. He'd issue Article 15s within 24 hours of the infraction or not at all. In his first month of command, he issued 15 Article 15s and then never had to issue another one after that. He received an anonymous phone call that he would be fragged, but this did not deter him. Lavin, with the help of a truly professional first sergeant named uh, Akasaka, Akasaki,
Yes, Seiji Yasaki, yes.
From Hawaii, the two turned the company around and passed both their CMI and IGs in January and February. After the first month, the men learned that Lavin actually had a great sense of humor and was a down-to-earth kind of leader. All he wanted them to do was to perform their jobs. When a soldier celebrated his promotion with a part of the enlisted man club, one would go to the first sergeant and ask if Specialist 4 Smith could attend the party. Spec 4 Smith was Lavin's nom de jour. He would don a shirt with a Spec 4 rank and have a drink with them. So
All
what?
true.
Yeah. So why don't you tell us about the 515th? Like, what was it? Like, it was a first. Why don't we talk about the battalion and what it had in terms of the different units in it, and then the kind of the organization and what each of the companies did, and then we'll dive further into the organization of the 515th.
Okay, as I knew it at that time, there was actually 4 companies that comprised the 39 Trans Battalion. The first one was the 666, and they were located right next to us on Camp Eagle grounds. And the 666 was a deuce and a half company, and they would take troops out to the various fire bases: Birmingham, Bastogne, Fire Base Vagel. And they were this, I'll call them the short haulers. They were obviously just the local Uber drivers, as you will, taking the guys, the replacements in and out of those areas. Because sometimes, and then the guys would come back for a little bit of R&R. So they all had homes, even the guys, some of them that were out on the fire bases and to be rotated in and out, would actually have a little break and come back to Camp Eagle to go to the PX and stuff, and then be back out into the field for a while. So unless they were permanent duty stations out there, like some of the artillery units and the bigger units, we would take food and ammunition with our 5-ton trucks, the 515th, out to these various fiber bases. I don't know how many deuce and a halves the 666 had, but I had 67 5-ton flatbed trucks. And I believe they were M65s, or I'd have to remember what model of truck they were, but they were all gassers.
Mm-hmm.
That's fact. And we had our main motor pool located down on Camp Eagle, and most of the drivers, some of the drivers would be gone a day or two. Let's say they were running out to Birmingham or Bastogne. they'd offload with help of the guys there. And if they couldn't come back in daylight, they'd have to stay on the post that night or the fire base. And they didn't just sleep in somebody's cot. They drug these guys out to the line, and they actually helped the guys spot people. So I have short stories from some of the guys where they were out and they were shooting, or they were shooting flares. You know, they know some of the infantry thing, and then they'd come back the next day and tell their stories and you know, function. We would also pick up some of our supplies from Dong Ha, but that I'll have to explain that later on. And some of our 5-ton trucks were equipped with what we call a fifth wheel dolly, and they would pull a 20-ton trailer behind them. So we would carry the load of a 5-ton truck and put all cargo on a S&P trailer and carry that behind us. And I think there were 2 companies in Vietnam that were experimenting with fifth wheel dollies. I'm not sure. I know we were the only ones in I Corps up north doing it. And it was experimental, and I know it proved to be very successful. And our drivers enjoy doing it, even though that's obviously a much bigger responsibility, especially driving in through some of the small towns. But the S&Ps never went out on the dirt roads or along QL9. They mainly stayed along Highway 1 going north and south to the supply bases. And the other companies, the 585th and 805th, they had the tractor trailers, and they'd go all the way down to Da Nang and bring stuff up to Phu Bai on their 20-ton flatbeds. So they're kind of out of the picture. I'm not familiar with them having the gun trucks as much as we did, to be honest with you. I think they might have, but that'd take some other further research. But both us and the 666 had gun trucks.
Okay, and we'll come back to gun trucks, but let's just talk about your TO&E in terms of how many personnel you had and vehicles and things like that. So how many packs did you have? You said you had 65 tons, but I'm guessing you probably had some other stuff too.
Like how do you mean? We had 2 Jeeps, and I had 3 lieutenant. Well, I guess we still only had 2 or 3 Jeeps. Can't remember. And we had the 3 lieutenants, and each of them had 1 platoon.
Okay, and you had M151 Jeeps?
Yes, correct.
Okay, and so it was basically the Jeeps and then the 5 tons, and that was all you had for motor vehicles.
Well, that, and then we had the 1 gun truck called the babysitter.
Okay, and we'll come back.
We can come back to that. And we eventually had an M113 up armored that I did in the field, but we'll have to come back to that on its building.
Did you have organic wreckers at all in your company?
Oh, yes, I did have 1 organic wrecker, and Harl Harvey was my wrecker driver through the whole thing. And Harl and I still keep in touch. I've seen him several times. He lives near in Oklahoma, on the eastern part of Oklahoma. Yes.
How would you employ the wrecker?
Well, all he did was go out, and in combat, it was a little different than actually daily use. It'd be like any other time when he'd have to go along QL1 or between Dong Ha, which was up north near the DMZ, off of QL1, and drive down. If the trucks broke down, he'd obviously just do stuff that even a domestic wrecker person would do. And sometimes when we were around and had to either pull an engine or do some stuff on stuff, they'd use the wrecker boom for non-official repair work, but it worked on the deadline, as you guys, anybody listening to this probably knows.
So if you guys were doing a run with your trucks, would you actually send the Jeeps with them? Because I think that those would be
sometimes if the officers, when on the gun truck, when we were doing that, one of my platoon leaders, Roger Malone, was actually on one of the gun trucks, and he was the officer OIC of the gun truck. And some of the other lieutenants would drive as if they were doing several things or moving stuff, they would go out and ride, sort of checking what's going on type of a deal.
Mm-hmm.
And again, that changed when we were in combat as to where everybody lived.
Okay.
And we'll explain that later on.
So you had probably a headquarters element, which probably had
I
what,
had
maybe some
two company clerks
mhm,
and me and my first sergeant.
first sergeant, and then did you have an XO, or
No,
was
I
it a,
did.
or
No, I
was
didn't. It was just me. You mean battalion headquarters or
no,
no?
no, no? I'm talking in your company in the
No,
515th.
it was just me and three lieutenants, and then it was enlisted after that. I had
Okay,
Richard Hurley, Malone, and Donald Bartletti were my three lieutenants.
okay, and each of them were platoon leaders for one of your
Correct. For
three truck platoons.
three, yes, yes.
So each platoon had probably what, 20 trucks?
Yeah, basically that. And I'd have to go back and kind of even check this. E7 Sergeant Washington was in charge of my motor pool. And that was a crew, obviously, within itself, because we had to change our own tires. We changed, get this, even in the field, about 20 truck tires a day. And while we were at Camp Eagle, we had a Papasan come and help the guys change tires down in our motor pool.
Hmm.
So that was a whole platoon in itself. And I'm not sure how many that might have had, but I'm sure it had, the 12 or 15 guys in it too, because it wasn't just one or two mechanics when we're maintaining 65 trucks. It just didn't happen
Yeah, well, it sounds like you had somewhere around 650 tires you had to maintain.
a year. And we had our total manpower for the company as of 1 December was 155 guys totally. And that
Okay.
included the 4 officers, and the rest were all enlisted.
So about how many guys were in a platoon roughly?
Well, like I say, let's say we had 4 platoons, you'd almost have or 40 guys in each platoon, or 31, 32.
Hmm.
Uh, you know, just I don't know that in a platoon where my two clerks and the first sergeant and all the other sergeants really just took care of guys and didn't drive trucks. I mean, it was solely the enlisted that drove the truck. Enlisted me, I mean, like spec four, and the E5s. We had several E5s, and they were more in management positioning down in the motor pool area. And one of my clerks was an E5, and the other was an E4.
Hmm.
So I'd be honest with you, I don't have an exact who was in what platoon, even though I've got my original company roster, my mimeographed original company roster in my possession.
Wow. So let's say a platoon would go out, like how would you assign people to a particular mission, and would it just be based
No,
solely on the
that no,
cargo or who's
basically on the
available?
cargo, and that was done down at the motor pool totally. I did nothing to tell what trucks went where, because prior to us actually going into the field, there was Dong Ha was a major port up north where all the ships would bring in their stuff, and it was a large concrete platform type of a facility, and the trucks would go there and get loaded, and then they would bring it down to um, uh, Fubai and Camp Eagle, where it would be redistributed or directly taken out of there. So that's why these guys would not necessarily come home every night. And I never really saw everyone in the company area at any given time at all. Zero.
Hmm.
So that even played more later on in what I did when I was in the field, but we'll talk on that later. I find it interesting that you're pulling up that picture of me that's you commented about earlier about Spec 4 Smith. Um, what's
Also, it
wrong?
shows the ring.
Yeah, it shows the ring. And the other thing that it shows, if you look close on the collar brass, that's enlisted man, that's E4 collar brass.
Oh, so
And
that's Specialist Smith.
And well, that isn't. And the other reason it's not a Spec 4 Smith uniform is it's a Marine camouflage uniform. And the guy sitting next to me is a Marine. And I went down to Da Nang to visit him. He was at the MAIL facility, the mail facility. And he said, you can't visit me in your captain's uniform. So he had a uniform extra from another guy that was not there that time. And for the about 4 or 5 hours I spent on the Marine post or base down there, I guess they call them bases, Marines. I even had the audacity to go in their mess hall and eat like that. And I had longer hair than everyone else. And he said, just say you're part of, and he told me what unit I was to say. And he said, nobody will ask you anything. It's a dead subject. And as other officers walked by and we were walking the mess, I just salute the officers as if I was an enlisted person. Now back to why that's in there instead of me in an Army uniform. When Kilblain wrote the book, Lomsam 719, The Cargo Must Go Through, he could not find a picture military uniform. And I said, Kilblain, why in the hell did you print that picture? And he said it because it was the only one we could find and it fit what we wanted to say about you. And I think that's kind of funny. I accused him of being a Democrat.
Let me see if I can find that book that you just mentioned. Amazon. Okay. So you had a 1-year tour in Vietnam, is that right? Or
Yes.
did you stay longer?
Nope, 1 year. It was enough.
Okay. So then you were in command how many months?
I was only in command from 1 December to about 23 April.
Okay.
So it was 5 months-ish.
Yeah, I can't seem to find the book easily, but okay, so let's go back. Let's see here, this picture. Here we go. There we go.
Yes.
Okay, so why don't you tell us how your company operated in the field?
So we went to the field in late January of 71. I actually got to go on R&R to Hong Kong in January, Chinese New Year. And when I came back to Vietnam, the guys were gone. There was only about 5 or 6 guys that stayed in Eagle. So they took me up to where my first sergeant was located at that time. And that was in the city of Quang Tri. And Hakasaki spent his entire time while we were in the field, which is about 2.5 months in Quang Tri, along with 1 or 2 other of my troops, just to take care of the billets that we would occasionally use while we were at Quang Tri. Then I was taken out to Firebase Vandergrift along QL9. Vandergrift was a former Marine fire base located along QL9, about 18 miles, I do believe, from the border town of Khe Sanh and the Khe Sanh Plain. The road out past the rock pile, Camp Carroll, and all that stuff along QL9 was an asphalt road. And once we got just short of Firebase Vandergrift, the road from there to Khe Sanh was a up and down curvy dirt road, and it was only 1 lane of transportation. The entire 515th company was located at Firebase Vandergrift, what was left of us in the little parts, and that became our actual start of operations, because our responsibility as a 5-ton truck unit was to haul cargo from Firebase Vandergrift up into Khe Sanh. And some of that cargo got picked up by Chinooks out just outside of Khe Sanh and transported to other areas in the rural part of along the Ho Chi Minh Trail, of course, the Vietnamese side of the Ho Chi Minh Trail, Laotian border area. And we would have one-way traffic going west in the morning hours, and in the afternoon it would come east as a one-way road. And this went on for the entire time they were participating in Lam Sam 719, which was the Vietnamese incursion into Laos being supported by the Americans on this side. The road was very dangerous, and our gun truck was running between that area. We were sharing the responsibility with the 523rd TC and their gun truck, the Eva Destruction that we talked about earlier, that's now in the museum at Fort Eustis. That's how I claim that they're our sister gun truck during that event. And we would change our tires. There's pictures in that book of us changing tires. We lived in a bunker that was underground that we actually built and put the sandbags on top. We had a GP medium tent setting beside that where we had some of our open operations. And we had a turnaround area there. We had an ammo dump located at the eastern end of the fire base. And we had a place where the trucks would turn around and transfer some loads going further west from the bigger trucks. It was quite a hub, and our neighbors were M155 cannon, or 105, 105 guns set up just next door that would randomly fire in the middle of the night and everything. It was an active place. And the only thing that was not real neat about it, we had high mountains on both sides of us, and the road ran down right down the middle of the valley. And every day at about 4 o'clock, or most days at 4 o'clock, we would get rocket rounds firing at us and landing in random locations. None of them ever landed in our immediate area. We did get a sapper one time during the time that got into the explosives into the thing. And I remember standing in the bunker and feeling what seemed like the whole earth lifting every time there was explosions.
Is it true that anytime a round landed in a company area, it always hit the property book?
Well, yes. I first time I've ever heard that was really kind of you doing this interview with me. And what that immediately reminded me of is I was bored sitting at that fire base all the time. I had one Lieutenant Bartletti and one or two of my guys that made their home in a B-52 crater up at Khe Sanh. And most of the guys were out on the road running around with the gun truck and everything. So I up armored an M113, and I put the name on the side and I'll come back to that in a second. I want to say one other thing. While we were early on in the adventure running back and forth between Khe Sanh, our guys saw a need to procure another 5-ton truck that somebody wasn't paying any attention to. And it was brand new. And we decided we needed to add that to our property. So we took the truck, made our own logbook, and painted it up as one of ours. And at the same time, when I was going along QL9 between Khe Sanh and Vandergrift, we found an M51 Jeep along the sides that the Vietnamese had abandoned because it had a bullet hole in the radiator. And my guys and I stopped and decided that needed to be ours. So one of the Jeeps that I was driving had a false logbook in it, and the numbers on it were totally fictitious. And that became my Jeep out in the field. And I left my Jeep somewhere else, or somebody else borrowed it. I don't even know. But we stole power washers and everything else on convoys in live time on these convoys along QL9. But back to where I was a little bored, and in addition to property book, became one M113 armored personnel carrier. And I, with permission of Colonel Ellis, the battalion commander, I sort of left the fire base for about 3 or 4 days. It was in early March, like March 2nd or 3rd. And I went back to Camp Eagle, and I up armored this thing. I went and got some road wheels from one of the units, infantry units that had an M113, and they gave me a pair of track jacks, and we changed a few of the road wheels. We learned how to do some of the maintenance on it with help from them. And then we went to our armory that we had down there, which was a Conex container, and put a Maudus up on the turret ring. I took two of my M60 machine guns, and using sandbags, I secured them to the back end of my 113. We loaded ammo in the thing out at the fire base from the ammo dump I was talking to you. And I would drive the thing very often along convoy protection, but running up and down the QL9 part that was dirt that last 18 miles. I actually went with the very first convoy. We went into Quezon. And what was interesting, we were supposed to be gone for like a day, but it ended up being almost 2 days. And the guys were sleeping under the trucks and everything else. And it's the picture on the very top of that book, Lamsam 7019. That was the 515's first day on Quezon Plain with our loads of food and ammunition ready to give to the 101st. And yeah, that was very interesting. There's a lot of pictures that exist of the up armor, and that there's not many posted online. They're in my negative file.
Mm-hmm. That's, it's great that it's documented so well. And, I think we've been going now about 45 minutes. So I think I'm going to go ahead and pause it here, and then we'll do a part 2. And that's when we'll get into gun trucks and what your interactions with the 515th after the war. So
Okay.
let me go ahead and hold on. Here we go. Okay, so if you enjoyed episode number 23 of Peep Show, go ahead, like, share, and comment. If you didn't enjoy it, why are you still watching? Why are you still here? We're 45 minutes into this. And besides, how can you not like Mike's stories? They're just they're pure gold in terms of American history. So anyway, I'm going to go ahead and pause this, and we will come back with a part 2.